Hi there, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I'm Praise Onyewe, a UI UX designer that is just out here dishing out free tutorials for designers. And today we'll be diving into a Figma beginner course for absolute beginners. So if you are thinking about starting UI UX design, this course is everything you need to know about Figma. And by the end of this video, trust me, you have the confidence to open Figma and dish out your first design. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started with this tutorial. In this course, I'll be walking you guys through introduction to Figma, where we'll talk about what Figma is, then the overview of what UI and what UX means. Moving further, I'll be talking about getting started with Figma, where you'll be taught on how to first set up your Figma account, navigating through Figma interface. Then you'll be taught on understanding the basic frames, layers, and basic tools you should know when you're starting out as a beginner. Moving further into this course, you'll be taught on what components are, on how to use them and how to apply them to your design. Same thing applies to auto layers, variables, and plugins, etc. You'll be taught so many things, so many terminologies that you need to know about Figma. Then also in this tutorial, you'll be creating your very first project. We'll be looking at creating a music app UI where you'll be taught on how to convert these key functionalities into wireframe, then into your actual design. Then the last thing for this class, I'll be teaching you guys how to prototype basic functions in Figma. So let's get into this tutorial. So what is Figma? Figma is a cloud-based design tool that helps you create designs, not just only designs that you can collaborate with other designers on and prototype in real time. Let's quickly define what UI and UX mean. As a beginner, I know you have been hearing a lot of UI UX and you might not know what it is. So let's just break it down for you. UI means user interface, which deals on typography, your color style guide, and the overall look of that particular product. While UX, on the other hand, which is the user experience, deals with how the product feels. Is it easy to use? Is it intuitive? These two terms work hand in hand when you're talking about user experience. And learning both UI and UX is a key to become a very successful designer. Let's just take a practical example. So this is mayonnaise in my hand. If I say this thing has a good UI, I'm basically referring to the outer design, the visual aspect of this mayonnaise, practically the branding. And when I say it has a bad UX, it means that the taste, it might not be sweet, it might be sour or whatever. So a product can have a good UI, meaning the design outside, but a bad user experience. In this case, I might say it has a bad UX, meaning that the taste is not appealing. So now that you understand what UI and UX means, let's move on into the next segment. Now that you know what Figma is and you know what UI and what UX means, let's go deeper into what we came for, which is getting started with Figma. So now I know so many of you might not know where and how to access your Figma account, so I will just be showing you that quickly in this module. You head on to figma.com, which is their website. This is what it looks like. So here we have product. I want you to understand that Figma has so many products in it. So I'll be discussing that later in this class. So I just want you to know that Figma has so many products under the same application, which is a Figma design, FigJam. So next on we have dev mode and Figma slides. Let me just do a quick explanation of what Figma slides are. Figma slides are just a dedicated tab on Figma that allows you to do your presentation stress-free. It's AI integrated, so you don't need to stress yourself whenever you are creating a slide. So I'll be teaching all this in this tutorial and no stone is going to be left untouched. So if you want to get started with Figma, this is it right here. Just click get started for free, of which you'll be led to set up your account either with a Google account or an email address. So when you download Figma, this is what it looks like. Let me just go on to the home screen. When you log on to Figma, this is what you see as the home screen. Don't be scared. All this here are just my personal project I've been handling. So when you're logging in as a new beginner, you shouldn't be seeing all this here because you have not started a real project. So over here, if you want to add a new design file, this is where you go add new design file. Moving over to this side, we have what we call FigJam. I want you to think of FigJam like a crime board. Sorry, I meant a sketch board. A sketch board where you can come and graft out ideas, draw out your ideas. So here is just for brainstorming, anything brainstorming or what you're thinking, your thoughts, your mood board. FigJam is just the place to go. Then this side is the tab I was explaining on the Figma website where you just come and do your presentation and all that. Here is where you can import your files into Figma. Whether it's a sketch file or PDF file, you can import them into Figma directly. Moving over to this side, there's nothing much here. This video is just the name of a project I'm currently working on. Then down here we have team project where you can collaborate with other designers. Don't worry, everything is going to be explained in this tutorial. Down here we have explore community. Community is just like a place where Figma designers just come and update their work on. Why some see it as a place to get clients from, though I've not really tried that, but let me just show you what the community looks like. just like a place to get inspiration, assets, even plugins and all those stuff. So you can discover libraries, plugins, icon set and more. So whenever you're having a project and you don't know what to do, Figma community can serve as a place of inspiration. So that's just basically everything about Figma community. With all this being said, let's go into the main course of this tutorial, which is creating our design file. So this is what you see when you open up a new design file. Don't be confused with all those things right here. By the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to navigate Figma swiftly. So like I said, when I was talking about what Figma is, I said Figma is a cloud-based design tool. And I know some of you didn't really understand. Let me break it down for you. So you see how all these stuff right here are projects from other clients that I've handled, because I'm also a graphic designer. So when I mean Figma is a cloud-based design tool, I mean that the storage of everything I'm doing right here is stored on Figma Cloud, not really on my computer. So that's why I just have all these things stuff here as if it's a mother scene. So this is why I just want to show you guys what Figma is as a cloud-based tool. On my left hand side we have this which says untitled. Let's just change this our Figma file into Figma tutorial. There we go. Coming over here, we have assets. Assets are where your components are stored, where it's just easy for you to access. Don't worry, I'll be showing more light later on what components are and how to use them. So this is just the basic knowledge of what assets are. Over here, we have pages. I want you to know that you can have more than one page in a design file. Let me show you what I mean. So I can click this plus here to select another page. So on this second page, I can change it to UI 1. And change this one to UI 2. So I can design on UI 1. Let me just do something real quick. Draw out a shape, something like this. So we can design on UI 1 and also come to UI 2, which is still empty, and design what we need. So for me, what I use pages for is explaining design briefs. So I can have up to 4 pages for one design file. One might be to store my components. The other might be to explain what I've designed. The other one might be showing the developers that have handed the job over to finish it, how to navigate through what I've created. So pages, you can just do whatever you want with pages, but for me, that's what I use pages for, and that's what most designers out there use pages for. Moving down here, we have layers. Layers is just a place where your design elements are stored. On this right sidebar, this is a section where you can adjust properties like color, typography, and alignment. Let me show you what I mean from our crime scene right here. So let me zoom in to show you guys what I mean from this course outline that we have right here. So this is a good example to show you guys what layers are before I talk about the property side on the right hand side. So the layers right here, like I said, is where your design elements are stored. As you can see, as I'm hovering through this place, you will see that is notifying me right here. So these are design elements under this particular design stored under our layers. And another thing I wanted to let you know is that layers are based on hierarchy. So what do I mean? Let me use this as a good example. So we have this image right here. If you notice, there's a text behind it. So on the layers panel, to notify you that this is the image right here. So I locked it anyway, so I can unlock it and lock it, and also hide it and unhide it. As you can see here, the image is above the two texts that are behind it. And if I should decide to take the image behind the text, what do you notice here? Our text is now appearing front of the image, which is not supposed to be so. This is what I meant when I said layers are based on hierarchy. So let's move on to the right hand side where we'll talk about properties. So like I said, the right hand side is meant for adjusting properties like colors and all those stuff. So let me select an element from this design. First, it's going to notify us that what we selected here was a rectangle. Coming down here, we have positions of where we can lay this design in this place. So if I want it to be at the center of our design, I'll just need to select this and it will go at the middle of our design. Same thing applies to all these places. These are alignment positions that you can use. You can tweak them as you want. Moving down here, we have these X and Y values. To me, it just does basically what these positions do, but in a more slower way. So if I want to change this to the right hand side, I mean the position of our rectangle. If I want to shift it to the right hand side, all I need to do is just to change the figures of this, and you will notice our rectangle is now moving out of sight. So this is what the right hand side allows you to do, just to make changes to your element. Over here we have prototype, of which I'll be showing you guys how to use prototype in the course of this tutorial. In this place, you can also add effect to your elements. In this case, the effect I used here was just to make the background blur, of which you can see right here. So that's just what the effects are here. We have other effects you can also add, either to cast an inner shadow or to make a drop shadow or to make a layer blur. Then the last one of which I selected was to make a background blur. Then the last one on this tab is where you can export your design. So I've taken my time to explain everything because I just want you guys to understand the basic elements of Figma. Then the most important part, of which I'm not going to forget, is your toolbar, which is just below here. It used to be up here before Figma made an update and they chose to bring it down here, which is kind of still better. So here we have this move tool. It's called move tool, where you can move things around. We also have hand tool right here. If I select it, it will allow me to move things around in a more faster way. Going back here, we have scale. If I want to scale this design, I'll just select this frame and now we have the ability to either scale it a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. Let me just cancel this. Moving over here, we have frame. But before I tell you what frame, I just remember we created a Figma file which we are supposed to be making reference to. So let's quickly go back to our empty file right here. So moving down here, think of frame like an empty sheet of paper. So this sheet of paper is just where we are going to be designing on. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to be selecting frame and we can create our own custom frame just right here. But what if we want to design a UI that is specifically meant for an iPhone 15 phone? So how do we do that, or how do we get the dimension of an iPhone? To get that done, just select this frame right here. The shortcut for it is F on your keyboard if you just like shortcut. So one thing you will notice on the right hand side is all these frames right here, which gives you the ability to choose the exact frame you are looking for. So if I'm looking for like an iPhone 15, like I said, I'll just need to come over to this place where it says phone and click it. Here we have so many devices with their different dimensions over here. So like I said before, we're looking for an iPhone 15 frame. So let's just click that and voila, it appears on our design board. So this is another way of which you can select frames in your design. Moving to the second tab is where your shapes are being kept. So all the shapes you are going to use in Figma, this is where you can access them. A rectangle, your line to your arrow to ellipse arrow, and so on. So if you are looking for shapes, this is where you go to. So this is rectangle right here. And if we want something like a polygon, we can also access that. And this is it right there. So that is it about this shapes panel. On this other side is where you can access your pen tool and your pencil tool. Then over here is where you can apply your text to your design. The shortcut for it is T on your keyboard and you hit enter on your frame. Let's type in something like my first Figma design. If you remember, where do we go to if we want to make changes to our element? We go to the right hand side where we have the properties. So let's increase the size of our text to something like this. Then we are going to change it from irregular to something bold. We can also change the alignment of how our text should appear. In this case, I want to just align it to the center. So if I should scale this a little bit down, you will see it's going to fold in into the center of the text. So we have different aligning options right here. If I want it to be aligned to the left hand side, that's it right there, but in this case let's retain it as center. So the next tool here is called comment. Comment is mostly used by clients when they want to drop a change on a design. Let me show you what I mean. So this is a design I handled. As you can see, there are so many of them here. So these are changes that a client wanted on a particular design. As you can see here, if I should hover through this, you will see what my client dropped on this, and if I should click it, you will see the full conversation that my client wanted me to change on this design. I mean, this is a whole lot, but it's actually a good tool when a client is trying to reach out to a designer to change or tweak things around in the design. So that's just the main thing of what comment is used for. So the next button here is called actions. The shortcut for it is Control key on your keyboard. Here you can access your assets. Access your assets sounds funny, but you can access your assets through the actions button. So the assets can either be accessed through this place or through your action button. On the other hand, we can access our plugins and widgets right here. I'll be talking on plugins and how you can use them in your design later on this tutorial. So just think about this action button like a place where you can come and make common settings. Let me show you what I mean. If I want to place a ruler on my design board, this is it right here because I use it too often. That's why it's written as recent right here. So I'll just come and click this and you'll notice the rulers are now visible. But in this case, I don't want to make use of the ruler, so I'll just come here and uncheck it. Moving over to this last button right here. So this button is what we call dev mode, which is mostly used by developers. So if I have this design and I'm handing it off to a developer, this is where a developer can come and inspect the design and collect the important information he will need to finish the project. So let me just tweak this to dev mode to show you what it feels like when we are in this section. If you see, a lot of things change because we are now in dev mode. It's not really like the normal Figma settings that you know, but unfortunately we cannot access this because we have to upgrade to professional to make use of this dev mode. But we have no problem with this because we are not going to use it in this tutorial. So let's quickly switch back to design mode. Let me show you how you can quickly import a picture into Figma. So I'll be selecting an ellipse here. The shortcut for it is O on your keyboard. So let's just select this. Holding down shift on your keyboard, we are going to drag this out so that it doesn't distort. Now we have selected our ellipse, it's time for us to now import the image into Figma. So how do we do that? The shortcut for it is Ctrl Alt K on your keyboard. So when you hit Ctrl Alt K on your keyboard, notice your folder is being opened. So I'm going to be selecting an image. Let me just look for one beautiful image to use. I'll be selecting this one. You will notice in notification where it says adding image. So you just wait a little bit for it to load. After it has finished loading, you will now notice the image on your cursor. It's time for us to now drop it where we want it to be. So in this case, this is where we wanted it to be. So we just click and it will appear on our design. So this is the simple way or the simple shortcut of which you can import an image into Figma. In this module, we are going to discuss what auto layout is. So what is auto layout? Auto layout is a powerful Figma feature that allows designers to create responsive and dynamic layout. Let's take a practical example so you can understand auto layout very well. We will be creating a button. We can either create a button using a frame or using the rectangle. Any of them is better to use. But in this case, I will just want to use a frame to create a button. I'm going to select my frame and draw out a button just like this. So this size is perfect for a button. I'll be adding a fill to it, to something like this, to make it more visible. After then, we'll be introducing a text to our button to make it more meaningful. So you can hit T on your keyboard or you select it from the toolbar. We'll be going with something like sign in. So what's one way you can perfectly align this text and the frame behind it? The short way for it is using alignment. So I'm going to be selecting the frame. Heading on to the position, I'll be aligning it horizontally. I will as well come here and align it vertically. So move on to the next by grouping this our button. So to group things in Figma, the shortcut for it is Ctrl G on your keyboard or Command G. I know someone is asking that there's no difference here since we have grouped our element using Ctrl G or Command G. So what is one way you can quickly notify a grouped item in Figma? If you look right here, you will see this box right here, this dashed box is quickly notifying us that this element is grouped. So this is one way of which you can use to notify grouped elements in Figma. I'll be making a copy of this button to show you how you can quickly use auto layout in your design. So let's assume I want to change this text right here. So let's assume we want to use this button for another UI interface and we needed to change the text. So let's go in with something like welcome back. But if you notice, there's something wrong with our button. Our button is not responsive, meaning that each time I have to copy a button and there's need to change the text, I would also manually come to change the width of our button, which is not supposed to be so. So this is where auto layout comes in to make our design perfectly aligned. So let me quickly delete this to show you guys how you can use auto layout in your design to give that responsiveness that your button needs. So I'll be deleting this right here. But first, let's round the corner of our button to give it that comfort zone. So we'll be going with something like a corner radius of 10 and hit enter on your keyboard. This is just how I see things when I'm designing, because I feel like when buttons has sharp ends, it's just giving this unwelcome feeling. I don't know about you though, but once we have rounded the corners, it's just giving this smooth vibe around the button. So to use an auto layout, we are going to first select the text and also select the frame right there. You can either access auto layout feature from just this tiny button right here. As you can see, it's saying use auto layout, but the shortcut of which I would like to show you guys is using Shift plus A on your keyboard to quickly select an auto layout. So what is one way you can quickly tell if a button is an auto layout, which is through the layers panel. So whenever we make things into auto layout, you will see it's being changed into a frame. I know someone is saying that nothing really changed since we have selected an auto layout in this button, but wait, let me show you what exactly changed right here. I'll make a copy of this text and let's try to change the text. Let's assume we want to change the text of this sign-in into something like welcome back, welcome back. I'm sure you notice what happened here. You see that our button is fully responsive. So this is what auto layout can do. It helps to save a lot of stress whenever we're working on designs. So if I need to change this, let me quickly copy it again for those that don't really understand. So if I want to change the text, I'll just need to come and change it without me stressing myself to extend the width of the button. So this is one way auto layout can help. But that's not all about auto layouts. Let me quickly show you what we can do on the properties menu. Figma is so smart that it will tell us the position of our button or our element when we are using an auto layout. In this case, everything we are using here is in an horizontal path. So that's how Figma analyzes our element and is always kind of correct. But that's not all we can do using auto layout. Then below here we can increase the horizontal padding of our button. So if we choose to like extend the width, this is one way we can do it without manually tweaking this. So here is where we can also make a vertical padding in our button. Let's take one more example. So let's assume we want to arrange these buttons vertically because it's already in an horizontal path. I want you to notice one thing here before we select an auto layout for this icon. We have uneven spaces in between these icons. So auto layouts can also help us align our elements in Figma. We then select an auto layout. The shortcut for it is Shift plus A on your keyboard. So as you do that, watch what happens here. So you see Figma auto layout feature perfectly align these icons in between them. So in between this icon, if you look at the property side, you see they have a padding of 99 between them. The initial plan was what if we want to align these icons in a vertical path. So here Figma analyzes it as a horizontal layout because it's really in an horizontal layout. For us to choose a vertical layout, this is it right here. We just come here and click it. We just automatically changes it to a vertical layout. We see how powerful and effortless Figma auto layout feature is. Now you have known what auto layout is and how to use them in the design. Let's move on to the next feature, which is component. So we are going to be talking about what component is in Figma. Without the prior knowledge of what auto layout is, you can't understand this component. So if you have been jumping this tutorial, I want you to go back if you missed auto layout to understand what auto layout is before we continue with component. So those are on the same page with me, let's continue in this module. So what is component in Figma? So just see component as reusable element that can help you create and maintain a consistent design project. So it helps you keep your design consistent and organized. So with all this being said, after we have talked about component, it will then lead us to what variant is, and eventually we'll talk about what component properties are. So let's quickly go into the practical example of how you can apply component to your design. So this is a design case study from the last auto layout lecture. So how do we select a component in Figma? But before that, let's just quickly assume something. I'll be duplicating this design case study using Ctrl D or Command D on your keyboard. So let's make as many copies as we want. Let me also make a copy of this one more time using Ctrl D or Command D on your keyboard. Okay, this is perfect to roll. So let's assume we're working on this design and our client just woke up one morning and said he doesn't like the color of our button. So what's one way we can save time without manually coming to each frame to change the color of each button? So this is where auto layout comes in. But before then, let me just delete all these copies right here. So we are left with our original design case study. So how do we set an auto layout on this sign in button? You select the button, right click, then scroll down to this place where you see create component. The shortcut for it is Ctrl Alt key on your keyboard. But if you right clicking to create a component, it's the shortest way to access it. So we are going to be clicking create component. I know someone there saying that okay, now we have selected the component, what next? Because he's not really noticing any change in this button. So this is how you know if a button is a component or not. So let's head back to our layers panel. You see a diamond shape on this button. So this right here is telling us that this button is a component. So now it comes to the part on how do we use them. To know if this actually worked, we are going to be duplicating this our button into so many places. So Ctrl D, and Ctrl D up. So let's now assume that these are buttons that we duplicated into so many places and in different pages on our design. Like I said before, let's assume our client woke up one morning and decided he doesn't like the color of the buttons. So what's one way we can change the color of all these buttons effectively without manually tweaking them? So it's already solved, just watch how the magic happens. So I will just be changing the button inside this one. That's the one we created a component on. Let's change it to something like a blue button. Let's just assume our client loves blue button. So let's choose a blue button right here. If you notice here, when we change the color of this one we made as a component, it applied to all these copies we made out of it. So this brings me to the second part of explaining how this magic happened. Just have it in mind that this one that we created as a component is called a master component, and all this one that we made a copy out of it is called instances. In other words, this one is a master component and here is a primary component. So this is where everything happens. We can make changes to a master component and to apply to all the instances. But one thing that doesn't apply is making changes to the instances and hoping it to change the master component. It doesn't work like that. So let me show you what I mean. If I want to change the color of all these buttons right here without manually coming to change them, and I want to change it from this instance, so just watch me change the color to something darker. So when I change the color to a darker shade of blue, you will notice it only changed on this button. It didn't apply to all these ones because all those ones here are called instances and here is the master component. So when you are creating components for your design, make sure you specify your master component from all the instances so you don't get that all mixed up. So what's another way you can know an instance or a master component? It's through the layers panel. So let me delete this right here. If you remember what I told you a component has a diamond shape, which is this one. This one here is called the master component. Let me change the name to master component. Let me change the name to master component so it doesn't confuse you guys. Component. So this one here is our master component. As you can see, it has a diamond shape. But what happens to the instances? If you notice, the instances has an empty diamond shape in between them. Going back to the master component, you see it has a diamond filled up shape. But on the instances, they are all empty inside. So that's how you can know an instance and a master component. Let me do that again for those that didn't understand. Selecting the master component, I will then change the color to another one. So if you notice, everything applied on our instances. But this doesn't just apply to colors only. It applies to text. So we can quickly do that. Let's type in something like welcome back. If you see, as I'm typing on the master component, it's also appearing on the instances. Now you have understood component. It will then lead us into the second thing for this tutorial, which is understanding variants. So what is variant? A variant is simply defining what a component is, meaning that a variant helps us to create reusable elements. But the difference between a component and a variant is that a variant helps you to create reusable elements in a more dynamic way. So let me show you what I mean. I'll be creating a button here to simply explain how you can use variants in your designs. But since you have understood what auto layout is and what component is, it's time to now create a button in a more professional way. So hit T on your keyboard to select a text. We'll be typing in something like login. We then increase the size of this text to something like 40. If you remember when we first created the button, we had to set up a frame first before introducing a text into the frame. But now things has changed and it's time to do it in a more professional way, which is through using auto layout that we have already learned in the last lecture. So to select an auto layout on this text, you hit Shift plus A on your keyboard. So when you do that, it now gives us the ability to add a fill to the background of our text. So I'll just do this, click the plus. We'll be changing this white color. Since our text is white, we have to change it to a completely different color. So I'll be changing it to something beautiful like this. So now we have our button. You see how easy it is to create a button using auto layout. Let's play with our horizontal padding right here. Let me just increase it a little bit. Then we add a corner radius of 15 pixels to our button and hit enter. Let's rename this frame and change it to button and hit enter. So now we have our button. It's time for us to create a variant. But before we create a variant, we have to first create a component before we create a variant. So let me not get you so confused. I'll just show you how you can get that done. So to create a component, I've already told you guys, you right click, scroll down here where you see create component and create a component. So now we have a component which is not a new thing to us. It's now time to create a variant. So through the same way, you right click, you scroll down to where you have this main component. Then on the other extended menu, you will now see add variant. When you click add variant, you will see added another copy of button. So what do I mean when we say a variant can help you create reusable elements in a more dynamic way? This is what I mean. Let's take a practical example. So in the world of UI UX design, we have to first understand what the user needs and how to swiftly guide the user through our app interface. So what do I mean here? If you are very conversant with apps, you will notice that when a button or an element is not available, it will appear in an inactive state. So basically what we are going to do is to change this second variant to an inactive button. So how do we get that done? We are going to first rename our buttons. So this one that we chose to be an active state, we are going to change this default to active. Then this second button, where we decided to make it an inactive state of this button, we are going to change this variant to, because it's a copy of this variant. So that's why you see it as variant 2 here. We are going to change it to inactive and hit enter. But that's not all. We have to first reduce the opacity to show that it's an inactive button. So we'll be changing this to like 30% here, and for the text 30%. So there we go, we now have our inactive button. What if I choose to add another variant? I will just click this plus and let's create another version of this button. Let me quickly change all this to 100. For this last variant that we added, let's change it to an outline of this button. So I'm going to be changing this background color to 0 opacity. Then I'll introduce a stroke to create an outline version of this button. So you see this add stroke, you click the plus and it's going to enable that stroke. So let me add a little padding to our stroke. So 2 is okay to go. Then I'll be changing the color of our stroke to the color of our original button. So now we have 3 versions of our button. One is the active state, the other one is the inactive state, and this one is the outline. Let me quickly change this our variant here. These are variant 3 to outline version. Outline. Let's just leave it as outline. This is where the magic happens. If you remember when we started this tutorial, I told you that asset is a place where our components are being stored. So we are going to be clicking this asset. You will then see the button we created in our asset. We are just going to drag it and drop it. This is where the magic happens. What if we now choose to change this our button to an inactive state in our design? We just come to this properties menu and change this active to inactive. So when we do that, you will notice our button is now inactive. What if we now choose to put it in an outline version? Same thing applies. You just come here and you change it to outline, and it's going to choose the outline of our button. So when you have followed the steps I've been teaching you guys, you will see how easy it is to design in Figma. So we don't need to manually come to create an outline version of this. We just have to set their variant components, then we just tweak things around in the properties menu. But that's not all. It doesn't really apply to text. What if we want to add an icon to this our button? Let's assume we want to add this icon into this button. It's very easy. You just have to drag it and drop it. The only thing here is that we just have to expand this. We can also do the same for the other ones. What if we choose to create a button without an icon? How do we do that? You already know we are going to be using variant. Let me show you how you can get that done. You head on to your properties panel where you see appearance. Then it's going to allow us to create what we call the boolean property. So we are going to create a boolean property in the sense that whenever we want a button without icon, we can do that. And when we want a button with icon, we can do that without manually tweaking them. I'll be clicking create a boolean property. In this case, let's rename this to show icon instead of show layers. So show icons. Then the value here is set to true because we want it to show the icons. Then you click create property. Nothing changed, right? But this is what changed. So like I said, what if we want to create a button without an icon? So the quick way to do that, when you come to your properties panel, you will notice a toggle right here. So it says show icons, of which you renamed it to. So now the icons are visible. So what if we want to change it to without an icon? We just have to toggle this and turn it off. What do you notice? Our icon is gone. And when we want to show our icon, we just have to do this, tweak it on, and our icon is visible. So this is how variant can help you align your design perfectly. Let me show you one more example before we call it a wrap on this module. We can as well do the same for our text. So I'll be selecting all the text we have here. So you head on to this properties menu where you see this appearance, and we are going to be creating a boolean property. So you click this boolean property and create property here. In this case, let's change it to show text. Let's give a spacing in between. It's automatically set to true because we want the text to show. Then you create a property. Coming to our instance, if we don't want the text to show, you head on to the properties menu and you see another new toggle which says show text. We just have to turn this off. So as we turn that off, you will see it's remaining our icon. And when we make it visible, our text is now visible. So in this module, I showed you guys how you can create an active state of a button and another inactive state, and the last one, which was an outline state, without manually tweaking things out. Then we also had this toggle which says show icons, which hid our icon, and when we want the icons to show, we just have to turn this on. Same thing applies to this show text. So you see how easy it is to understand variants and components if you first understood what auto layout is. So that's why we just have to take it step by step in this tutorial. In this module, we are going to be discussing on what layout grid is and how you can apply them to your design. And after then, this is the fun part. We'll be creating our first project in Figma. So me and you are going to be creating a project for a music app UI design. So don't miss this section for anything. So let's continue with what layout grid is. So what is layout grid? Layout grid is just like a customizable overlay that helps designers organize their content on their frames, which create a very consistent structure. With the basic knowledge of what layout grid is, I'll be showing you guys how you can use a layout grid in your design. So I'll be selecting a frame. I'll be going with iPhone 16. Let me just drag this over here. To select your layout grid, it's on the properties side. You just have to scroll down and you will see layout grid here. Then you click the plus. You will notice these grids on it, but in the world of UI UX design, we mostly use columns as a grid system. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to be clicking this grid setting, and this is grid. I'll be selecting columns right here. This is the standard column system that most designers, so many designers use out there. I'll be showing you guys what these things means and how you can apply them to your grid. So the first one, which is count, is the number of columns that we have here. So the standard is set to 5. If we should increase this, let's say 8, you see that the number of columns here has increased to 8. Moving down here is how we can change the color of our grid. We're not going to be concerned on this because everybody knows what colors and how you can select colors. Then moving down to the type, it's automatically set to stretch, meaning if we expand the width of our frame, you see that the grid system here is responsive to the width of the frame. So that's what it means when this thing is set to stretch. We also have other types here. If we want our layout grid to be aligned to the center, this area here, same thing applies to this, to the left and also to the right. So always set it to stretch if you are setting out a layout grid, so it will be responsive. Moving down here, the width is automatically set to auto. Moving down to these margins helps us to contain all our design elements in a particular container. Let me show you what I mean. So I should set a margin of 20. If you look at both sides, you see spaces in between it. This is what margins help us to do. And if I should increase these margins, you see that it gives more space or more room for our design element. So let me just leave this at 20 and hit enter. So if we are designing, everything we are going to be designing is supposed to remain in this particular containment. It shouldn't exceed outside this space here. So this is how margins help us to perfectly align our elements in a container. Moving down here, we also have gutters. Gutters are just like the lines in between these columns. So if I should take this gutters to like 10 and hit enter, you see that the line became a little bit smaller. So gutters are just like the lines in between columns. Let me just do a rush back on what we have just taught. So columns are just like the number of the margins in this frame. The type is automatically set to stretch because we want it to be responsive. That's how this grid system is responsive. This is automatically set to auto. The margins, on the other hand, is what helps our design element to be in a particular container in our design. Gutters here are the lines in between columns. So this is all about grid system. Next up, I'll be showing you a custom grid system that I normally use when I'm designing. So whether you're creating for a mobile application, a desktop, or even an iPad, there are kind of custom grid system we normally use that helps us guide us in our design. So I'll be showing you guys real quick on how to get that done. So I'll be deleting this. So I'll be selecting 3 frames. One which is a mobile application. So I meant iOS since it's an iPhone 16 brand. Then the second one is a desktop. So we just scroll down here to desktop and choose MacBook Air. So this is a desktop size. Let me just shift this. So I'll be selecting the last frame, which is a tablet or an iPad. So I'll be going with this iPad Pro 11, just like this. So the grid system I normally use, I just call it the 12, 8 and 4 grid system. So this is how it works. We are going to be using a 12 grid system for a tablet since it's a large frame, then the 8-grid system for an iPad, and the last one, which is a mobile application, we're going to be using a 4-grid system. And if you watch it, you'll see it's divisible by 4. So this one goes for 12, this one goes for 8, and this one goes for 4. So let me show you guys how you can get that done. So I'll be enabling my layout grid. You scroll down, plus, then we are going to be selecting columns. For the count here, since we are using a 4-grid system for a mobile application, we are going to be changing this to 4. Then moving down to the type, automatically set to stretch like I told you guys. Then for the margin I normally use is 20. So I'll be using 20 as a margin for a mobile application. Let's move on to the next, which is our desktop. So like we said, we'll be using a 12-grid system for our desktop. So let's select columns right here. Then the count here is going to be set to 12 since it's a 12-grid system. Then for the margins, I normally use a margin of 70 when I'm designing, so it just gives this correct padding on both sides. So this is it for that of desktop. Then the last one is for our iPad. So let's just select this, enable our grid, select columns. What grid system do we say we are using here? 8, right? So we'll be selecting the margins to 8, the count to 8. Then for the margin, I'll be using the margin of 70 and hit enter. So this is a perfect grid system when you want to design for any given application. You can go with this and it's good to go. But let me show you one trick of which you can hide and unhide your grid system. The shortcut for it is Shift plus G on your keyboard, and you see that the layout grid is hidden. And when you press Shift plus G again, everything becomes visible. So this is just like the brief of how you can use layout grid. If you are looking for a very explainable video of understanding what layout grid is and how to create a responsive grid system, do well to check my channel and you'll see a playlist for that aspect. It's time for the interesting part, which is creating our first design project. Okay, your first design project in Figma. And in this project, we're going to be creating a UI design for a music app. So the first key functionalities we have here is a personalized recommendation, which says that we must create a recently played tab which shows recent tracks or playlists of the user. Then the second one here is setting up a trending tab, which is based on user history or popular content on the platform. So this tab is going to be dedicated to popular music on the platform. Then the third thing here is setting up a top chart for popular music. So we're going to be having like this top 5, top 4 charts, music charts in this particular design. The next one is setting up a search and filter feature. Moving down here is a premium card feature to allow listeners upgrade their account to access other features like ad-free access. So we're going to be creating like a card feature, a premium card feature that will allow listeners to upgrade their account to premium. Next up, we have like a feature that will enable people use like their voice to like search for a music or whatever they are looking for. Next up, we have genre filters, which is basically what this search and filter function we do in this design. We are going to be having like a mini player and a playback control. So a persistent mini player at the bottom with a basic control, play, pause, and skip. Then the last one for this requirement is setting up a user profile that will allow users to access their profile settings. So all these key functionalities are going to be interpreted into a wireframe first before we move into designing the actual design. I know someone is wondering, what is wireframes? So think of wireframes like the blueprint of building up a house. So same thing applies to the design world. It's just like a blueprint that will guide us when we are creating the actual design. So wireframing can also be done on FIGMA, but we are going to be doing it on this design board. There is no need to just switch tab and go to FIGMA. Let's just do everything right here. I'm going to be selecting up a frame. We'll be going with an iPhone brand, iPhone 16 preferable. I'll be making it a dark theme, so I'll just shift it down to something like this. But since we're dealing with a black frame and our design board is also black, so I don't want it to confuse you, though it won't confuse me, but it will confuse you kind of. So we're going to be changing the color of our design board. How can we do that? Look at it right here. You can just select this page and let's change it to white. So this works better. It's just too bright on me. That's why I just like choosing it as a black frame. But for this case, I will just take that as an exception. So let's start interpreting all these key functionalities into wireframes. We are going to be starting with creating a user profile. So how do we get that done? We are going to be using an eclipse for that. So you hit O on your keyboard, and this is where we want our user profile to be. On this right hand side, I will just want like a welcoming text to be there. So I'll be representing it with a rectangle. Do something like this. So this here is just representing a text. So it's going to be something like hi John or hi Praise. That's just going to be welcoming the users into the application. Coming back to this personalized recommendation, when we are talking about trending tab, it should come first, right? Because the first thing that every user wants to see is something that's trending. So we are going to be creating a wireframe for that. So I'll be selecting a rectangle, hit on your keyboard to represent these trending tabs. So we can have something like this. Let's make a copy of this by hitting Ctrl D on your keyboard. So we are going to be dragging this tab just opposite here. So let's just give a little spacing and drag it down. So we should have a text above here that is going to tell users that this tab here is a trending tab. So let's just copy this. So since it's a single line text, we should just have one of this here. So this right here is just telling us that there's a text there. So this is just what wireframes are, just like giving the structure of how our design is supposed to be. So we are done with this trending tab. So this is it right here. So the next one that should follow is setting up a recently played function. So this is just going to be after this trending tab. So how do we get that done? I'll be noting this out as an eclipse. So let's just make a copy of this. So everything is just like a rough work of how design is supposed to be. So this right here is already solving this recently played tab. Let me just give a little spacing. Then the text is going to come before this recently played function to tell people that this particular section is for recently played songs. So I'm going to be selecting this and making a copy of it. So like I said, everything is not supposed to be perfect because it's just like a wireframe. So we're just grafting out just like the background work of how our design is supposed to be. Next up, we're almost done with this section. The last one here is setting up a top chart feature for popular music. I'll be selecting out a rectangle just like this. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let's make it a little bit smaller. So this square here is going to contain the music album design or the artist picture. Then what should follow? The name of the artist and the song that blew up, right? So we are going to be noting that using our text, our imaginary text. So this should do for the name of the song, and just below it should be the name of the artist. There's supposed to be a text above this section that is going to tell people that this part you're scrolling to is dedicated for top charted music. So we're going to be copying this once again. So it selects everything and we're going to be making a copy of this top charted music. We want it to be like a section of 4. This is 3, 1 left, and there we go. We are almost done with translating these key functionalities into wireframes. I know someone is curious to ask where these remaining key requirements are going to enter on this design since we are almost done with this frame. So one way to solve that is by expanding it. It doesn't mean when you're designing. So we can expand this to the length at which we want, but don't make a mistake by expanding the width of this frame because it's already a fixed width for an iPhone 16 brand. So we can only make adjustments to the height of the frame but not the width. So the next function here is a search and filter function. So how are we going to get that done? So I feel like this is supposed to come before everything down here, because have you ever seen a search bar or a search icon just below this tab here? It doesn't really work. So we are going to be applying this search function before displays. So let's just denote that as bring out a rectangle. So this search bar is going to be just at this point. So I feel this has solved this search and filter function. Same thing applies to this quick search because everything is going to be accessed through here. So I feel like we have used one stone to kill how many birds? 1, 2, and 3. 3 birds. So the second one here is setting up a premium card feature. So since you are specifying it must be a card, we are just going to be doing it just like that. So let's just bring out a rectangle. So this right here has solved this function of this premium card feature. So when users are scrolling through this app, they can come in contact with this card that will enable them to like upgrade their account if they want to premium. So the last one here left for us to interpret is setting up a mini player and a playback control. So since it's just this one function that is left for us to interpret, we are going to be dragging this back to somewhere like this. So this right here can solve the function of that remaining requirement. You hit R on your keyboard. Let's just bring out a rectangle just like this. Let's make it a little bit darker. So this rectangle is for our navigation bar. For this last function, this mini player and a playback control. So remember when you kind of log into a music app and you want to continue from music that you were listening to before, you'll notice that the tab is always just below here where you can just press that pause and play button. So we are going to be creating that same action right here. So let's just drag this out. Let's change the color to something really darker. So let's just copy this square. So now we have space for the picture of the music, the name of the artist, and the song that you are listening to. Then the next thing is the function where you can pause and play. Let's just draw out a shape, just something really simple, and that is it. So we now have the pause and play button right here. Finishing up this wireframe, we are going to be bringing out our navigation bar. So I want like 3 icons to be just below it, just like this. So like I said, it's a rough work and we are done with our wireframe. It's time for us to now bring this our wireframe into life. We'll be selecting the same iPhone 16 frame just right here. We'll be changing it to a dark theme. We'll be using the color picker to pick the exact color from the wireframe. We'll be selecting a layout grid that will help us to create a consistent design. So we are going to be clicking this layer grid, columns right here. We'll be using a count of 4 like I taught you guys in the last module. Then for the margins, we'll be going with 20 and hit enter. So hit here on your keyboard and I'll be writing something like hello. There we go. So we're going to be reducing the size. We'll be reducing the size to something like 15 pixels. Let's zoom in a little bit. And we'll be aligning it to our grid just like this. So you see how it snaps to the grid. And if you check the spacing between our text and our margin outside here, you will see it's 20 pixels. Hold it down your Alt key. So we are good to go. We will copy this text and write down the name of the person. Let's just write something like Jerry John. That's a nice name. Due to hierarchy reasons, the name of this person is more important than this text. So we are going to be making this text a little bit bigger and bolder. So we'll be going with something like a font of 20. Let's make sure everything is perfectly aligned. So I'll be selecting the 2 texts and checking my Alt key to see if it's 20 at the outside. We then select an auto layout for these 2 texts, Shift plus A on your keyboard, so everything is going to be aligned without us tweaking things around. We'll be moving on to the next, which is setting up our profile menu right here. So we can copy this from the wireframe into our design. Let's just make sure it's aligned to our grid. Using the Alt key on your keyboard, let's check if this is perfectly aligned. So that's 20, so we are good to go. We'll be fixing an image into this place. So to bring an image into Figma, like I've taught you guys, if you can remember earlier on the tutorial, the shortcut for it is Ctrl Shift plus K on your keyboard. We'll be going with this picture and hit open. All we have to do here is just to select this our eclipse and click enter, and it's going to assume the position of the eclipse. Though we didn't specify this while we're grafting out our wireframe, but we want like a notification icon to be before this our profile picture right here. I already have the icon here. Everything is here. I just have to click this, select it, and make a copy of it into our frame. We are going to be aligning these 3 elements together. So we are going to be selecting our eclipse and our text. Then you move to the position side and we are going to vertically align this. Then after this, we are going to nest all these elements into a group. So to select a group or to group things in Figma is Ctrl plus G on your keyboard, and let's just group this. So we'll be naming this our top bar navigation. Let's just name it as top bar navigation now. So that's good to go. So now this is an element on its own. Let's move further into creating our design. The next thing on our wireframe is our search bar. So we're going to be bringing out a rectangle, hit R on your keyboard. We then make sure everything is aligned into our grid. So pressing down Alt on your key, you see that it's 20 on both sides. So we're on the right track. But before I forget, there's something called a spacing system when we are designing. I didn't really tell you guys this on time, but we are going to be creating like a spacing system that will guide us through this app. So this is how it's going to work. We are going to give a spacing of 20 pixels between elements that do not relate. Then a spacing system of 10 pixels to elements that relate in content. Let me show you what I mean. From this our search bar, it doesn't really relate to these elements that we grouped here. So what's going to be the spacing between this element and our search bar? 20 pixels. So let's make sure it's up to 20 pixels. This is 21, and let's take it down to like 20.7 is okay. For this our search bar, I'll be changing the corner radius to something like 10 pixels to give those sharp ends a little bit of curve. We then decrease the opacity of this our search bar because we don't want it to be too attractive to the eye. So we'll be reducing it to something like 10 pixels, and there we go. We then type in a text to give it more meaning, kind of like a prompt engine. So we'll be typing in something like popular music. You give a comma, then we'll be typing in another text, something like latest album. We then decrease the size to like 10 pixels. This is perfect. Then this text is too bold. We are going to be reducing this boldness. We are going to be changing it to regular right here. We then decrease the opacity of this text because it's not an active text. So it's just like a prompt engine text that will just give the users like an idea of what they are looking for. We'll be changing the opacity to 50 pixels. So this is a search icon and this is a filter icon. So this search icon will just go before this text. So we're going to be selecting it. We then make sure that this our icon, our text is perfectly aligned. So we'll be aligning it vertically. Let's group this our icon, our text. So you group it with Ctrl G on your keyboard and this is already sorted out. Then for this filter icon, we are going to be taking it to the other side of our frame. Let's make sure that there's a spacing of 10 pixels between this element. This is 8, 9, 10, 10.41 is okay to roll. Then let's check if everything is perfectly aligned. So we're going to be aligning it vertically. We then group everything into another group by hitting Ctrl G on your keyboard. Since we're done with this search bar, let's move down into creating our trending tab. So we can just copy this and place it on our actual design. We then make sure it's aligned to the grid by holding down your Alt key. This is 20 right there, so it's perfect. Then we'll be rounding the corners. Let's just tweak this just like this. We then add an image into this frame using the shortcut Ctrl Shift plus K on your keyboard. We'll be selecting this music art template here. All the resources is going to be available if you want to try it out when you are less busy. The next one we're going to be putting on this frame is the name of the music and the artist. So to do that, we are going to be placing the text just below here. But if we place it, it's going to appear somehow because the image here is kind of bright. So what are we going to be doing here? We'll be making a gradient fill to make this downside a little bit darker. So hit R on your keyboard and we'll be drawing out a rectangle. We'll be changing the color. We are going to be going with a dark color just like this. Then we add another gradient to form that fill right here. I'll be going with the same color. So this one is a little bit brighter. We'll be making it just as dark as the previous color. But this is what is going to happen. We're going to be changing the opacity to 0 to create a gradient fill. So this is what I'm going to be doing here. I'm not really satisfied with the darkness of this gradient. So I'll be copying it. Hit Ctrl D on your keyboard to something like this. Let's just drag this a little bit up and let's copy it one more time and we are good to go. So now our text can now come in without it being a distraction to the main background image. So hit T on your keyboard. Let's just go with something like Lonely Road because this is what the image is kind of trying to tell us. Lonely Road. We'll be reducing the size of the text to something like 20 pixels and that is good to roll. So this is the name of the music. We are going to be placing it here. You make a copy of this for the name of the artist. So let's just pick up an imaginary artist. Let's just say Drake Fitz Juice. This is just an imaginary artist. So we are going to be reducing the size to 10 just like that. So let me quickly align this. We'll be aligning it to the left. We will then create like a play button right here. So to do that, you hit on your keyboard to bring out an eclipse. You change the color to something lighter, to something like this because this is a brown color we are using for this project. Let's quickly align this. Let's shift it up a little bit. To create a play button, we are going to be using this shape. It's called polygon. Yeah, I got it right. So polygon, we are going to be dragging it out like this. Then align it to the center of our eclipse. That's it. Then we'll then round the corners. We'll be going with a corner radius of 2 pixels and we are good to roll. Let's change it to like 3 pixels to give a smooth feeling. So we'll be selecting our play button and the eclipse, grouping them with Ctrl G on your keyboard so that it can just come in one piece just like this. We are done creating our trending tab. Let's make a copy of this for another trending music. So I'm going to be copying this, Ctrl D on your keyboard to select it to the other side. So like I said about our spacing system, since these two cards here are kind of related, we'll be leaving a spacing of 10 pixels between them. So let's holding down Shift on your keyboard. This is 13 pixels. Let's reduce it down to 10. I will then make a change to our picture because I don't want it to be the same thing with this previous one. We now have our card design. We'll be shifting this to the down to make space for our text that is going to come in. So you hit T on your keyboard to select a text. We are going to be introducing a text to describe what these two frames for, which is trending music, right? So we hit T on our keyboard to bring out our text and we'll be typing something like trending music. Following our spacing system, like I said, we'll be giving a space of 10 pixels between elements that relate in content and a spacing of 20 pixels to content that do not relate. So in this case, this trending music relate to these two frames right here. So be given a spacing of 10 pixels between them. Then the next thing we are going to consider here is our 20 spacing system between elements that do not relate. In this context, this trending music does not relate to this search bar that we made here. So how many spacing I'm going to give? 20, right? By holding down shift on our keyboard, this is already 19 pixels. So I'll be selecting both frames, then shift it down more to make it 20. Moving down here, we'll be creating our recent music. So I'll be starting with the text. Let me copy this and take it down here. We'll be leaving a spacing of how many? 20, right? Because this two tab here does not relate to recent musics. So we are going to be doing that using our Alt key. This is already 21, so we just return it back to 20.4. The next thing right here is to bring in our eclipse. To align this perfectly, we'll be using an auto layout to give the perfect and consistent spacing system between this eclipse. By using the shortcut Shift+A to select an auto layout, everything is now aligned. We then fixing images into this blank eclipse. So what's one way we can effectively do that without really going to our gallery is through plugins. But I know I've not showed you guys what plugins is and how you can apply them. I'll be showing you guys how to do that right now. So heading on to our resources panel. So what is plugin? Plugin is just a feature in Figma that adds extra functionality to Figma. So it's just like a tool or a application per se that we just add more functionalities to Figma. Let me show you what I mean. So we have this eclipse here and we want to add images to it. We can use plugin to do that. So let me go to plugins. Going to plugins, you will see all those ones. These are plugins I normally use. This is on Splash for images. This one mockup plugins for mockups and other stuffs, and we have other plugins for different functionalities. So that's why I said it's just like a feature that adds extra functionalities to Figma. So I'll be going with Splash because I want to add pictures to my design. We then come over to this place where it says portrait because I want to put images that contains human beings. So I'll be going to this place where it says portrait and be clicking it, and it's going to insert images randomly to all this eclipse. So let's just go ahead by clicking portrait. These are the images that our Splash choose for us, but if we don't like it, just like this one, I don't like the selections of all these images, we can always reshuffle. So we are going to go back to this portrait and click the portrait again and wait till Splash gives us the perfect pictures that we are looking for. After the reshuffle, I'm okay with this selection, so we just go with this. So this is how plugins can help us add more functionalities to Figma. On the other hand, what if we want to view our recent listing to musics on another tab? So we can do that through adding another text, which is a see more text. So let me just copy this to show you guys what I mean. I'll be changing this to see more. We then reduce the size to like 12 pixels and we are good to roll. Let's align it to the grid just right here. So in this case, if we want to see more of our recent musics, we just have to click this see more button and it will lead us to another tab. Next up, we'll be creating our top chart music section that we have here. So this is what I'm going to do because I'll be really fast on this. I'll be adding images to all these boxes that we have here using the plugin on Splash like we did for this eclipse. Then I'll be fixing in some text, the name of the song and name of the artist on this section. So this is the top chart section. This is where the image is, the name of the song and name of the artist, just like that. And we have a see more button if you guys want to see more top charted music. Then here we have a spacing of 20 pieces between this top chart text and this upper one. So we just followed everything like we used to. Next up, we'll be creating our premium card feature that we have here. You then round the corners and I'll be adding a gradient fill background to this frame. So this is right here, I just added a gradient fill background and applied the text to it. Something like explore our premium plan. So in this way, this gradient fill is just kind of attractive to the eye when the user is scrolling through this app. So this is another way we can grab the attention of the user to kind of upgrade their account to premium. We then slide in our navigation bar that we have here. So everything I've already selected it for you guys. All you have to do is just to access the link and you're able to use this file and the elements in it. So I'll just put this in just like this. Let me quickly explain something that we have here. This home icon and the text has a different color and these other ones has another color. So this is, since we are creating a UI for a home page, we have to show the activeness on the icon. So that's why we have this home icon here with another color. On the other hand, we have this library. These are for other slides and we cannot have 3 active buttons in a design. So that's why we have to put this one, which is a home page, another color to differentiate it from the rest. The next thing we are going to be doing to finish up this design is to add our playback control, which is adding the image right here and the name of the song we are listening to and the artist. Then also a pause and a play icon right here. Let's quickly create a rectangle, hit on your keyboard. In this case, I want to round the corners, but I don't want it to apply to the 4 corners of this frame. I just wanted it to be on these 2 sides right here. To get that done, I will have to come here and I'll be able to add the rounded corners individually. So I'll be putting in 20 pixels here and also 20 pixels for the other side. Then also we'll be reducing the color because it's kind of too bright. The next thing I want to add to this rectangle is an effect, a background blur effect. I'll be reducing the opacity to something like 30 pixels and hit enter. So the next thing I'm going to be adding is our effect. In this case, the effect I want to add is a background blur. So this is right here. So I'm increasing the blurriness of our rectangle. So we have 29.7 right here, which is okay. And if you notice on this rectangle, you see the background is blurred. Let me remove the grid to show you guys what this effect did. So this area here without the grid, it looks very attractive. So that's why I decided to make the background blur. The next thing I'll be adding here is the music design, the name of the song and the artist, then a playback control on the other side. In this case, I'm listening to Location by Burna Boy. While on the other hand, we have our controls here. This is a shuffle icon and this is a pause and a play icon. So that's it for this design. This is what we're able to create so far, but there's another thing we have to do right here. We'll be creating another UI design specifically for this action right here. Let's assume we want to listen to other songs by Burna Boy. All we have to do is just to click this and it will lead us to another tab for Burna Boy specifically. We'll be creating another frame, so hit F on your keyboard and we're going with the same iPhone 16 brand. We'll then change the color. We'll be using a color picker for that. Let's just pick this and that's it. So I'll be adding a picture of Burna Boy here. Let me just impute that from my gallery. The next thing we'll be adding here is a gradient fill background, just like we did for this particular frame. So I'll be hitting R on my keyboard to bring out a rectangle just as big as this. You change the color to a dark one, make it a gradient. So we now have this gradient fill background. Let's just cancel this. We then duplicate this, Ctrl D on your keyboard, one more and we are good to roll. Let me just take this up a little bit. We'll then be creating like an enlarged format of this one that we have on the initial design. So you hit R on your keyboard to bring out a rectangle. I'll make a copy of it once more, then reduce the size to something like this. I'll be selecting the tool, reduce the opacity to 20 pixels, then add an effect just like we did on the other one. Background blur, and let's make it very blurred. You hit T on your keyboard and I'll be writing the name of the song right here. For this remaining space, what I have in mind to do there is just to create like a music wave. You know when you're listening to a music, you will see these wavy signs of the music. So this is what I just want to impute here. So to do that, you are going to be pressing R on your keyboard. We'll be having something like this. And basically what we are going to be doing here is to copy this, just like this, then increase the size to create that wave. Then we'll copy it again, so something like this. Reduce the size. So there's no format to it, it's just you reducing and increasing to create like a wave. So we are going to be doing that consistently. So this is basically what I'm going to be doing because I'm going to be fast on this. So we just have to be creating lines, reducing their sizes and increasing it to create the wave of music that we want. So this is what I was able to come up with. We now have our waves of music. So this is what I was just trying to explain. But we're not done yet. The next thing we're going to be doing is to separate the active wave from the inactive wave. So let's assume that we are listening to this music and this is where we are listening to. This is the point at which we have listened to. So let me just select this and we are going to be changing the color of this one from here to this downside to another color to show that we have listened to that part. So I'll be selecting everything down here. So we are going to be changing the color to something different. So let's just make it a little bit brighter, just like this. So in this case, it's notifying us that we are listening to a music and this is the point where we have listened to. And now this side is yet to be listened to. So this is how you can use colors to differentiate the active state and the inactive state of an element. So I just added other element to this design, which is this text that we have here, the amount of song in this album, and our music control right here. So this is basically what I wanted to do when I said we want to create an enlarged format of this, which we're able to create, and we got something like this real quick. So in this module, we're able to go from interpreting our key functionalities into wireframe, then into our actual design, and we even created another simple design in this tutorial. The next thing I'm going to be teaching you guys, or the next module for this tutorial, is how to prototype. I'll be looking at how to turn this static design into something responsive like this. I'll be showing you guys how to do a scrolling animation just as we are seeing it right here, then a horizontal animation. Then also I'll be teaching you guys how to do a cross animation, so that if we click this song that you are listening to at the bottom here, it will lead us to the second page. Then lastly, I'll be showing you guys how you can return this page to the home screen by clicking this simple navigation right here. So what is prototype? Prototyping in Figma is just the process of turning your static design into clickable and responsive version of that design. So just give this feel of how your website or your app should look like if the user is using it. So we're going to be starting in creating a scroll animation with this design that we already have here that we created from the last module. So to do that, we are going to head on to this prototype right here. So let me just walk you through some settings that we have here. If I should select a frame, you will see flow starting point and interaction. So I'll be showing you what this flow starting point means. So when we click this flow starting point, what it's going to do is that since we're using an iPhone 16 frame, it's going to bring in an actual image of an iPhone 16 brand to give us the actual feeling of on how our design is going to look on an actual iPhone. To access that, just click this button after this flow one, and it's going to bring out your virtual iPhone 16 phone. So this is one of the features I really like about Figma, because it just gives you the actual feel of how your design is going to look on the device you are working on. You can also make changes to the color of our design. If you want it to be a pink color, it's going to select it as a pink iPhone just right there. You just want to give you the actual feeling of how your design should look on the actual device you are working on. Then we play our prototype to see if it's going to give us that scrolling effect we are looking for. As you can see here, if I'm trying to scroll through this page, you will see that it still remains static. So let me explain why we have this issue. First, to create a scrolling prototype in Figma, we have to introduce more content to the frame, and that is why we have to increase the length of this when we're designing it. We have to increase the length of this our design so that we can chip in more content to create a scrolling effect. And if I should play this prototype from here, you then see that our design is now scrollable, but there's one issue that we have here. Our header and our footer, which is the navigation bar, is not supposed to be scrolling with the frame. So I'm going to teach you how to stick this header and this our footer or our navigation bar to be in a fixed width. So when we are scrolling, it doesn't scroll with the other element of this design. So just a recap, if you want to create a scrolling prototype in Figma, you have to chip in more elements into the frame to create that animation. To put this in a fixed position so it doesn't scroll with the other element of the design, we have to select it. We move on to our right hand side where you see scroll with parent. We are going to change this and put it to fixed because we want it to stay in a fixed position when you are scrolling through this interface. We also do the same for this our header by changing this scroll with parent to fixed position just like this. And let's play our prototype to see if this actually worked. So when we scroll through our prototype just like this, you will see that our header and our footer is static on the frame. So this is how you can create a vertical scrolling effect in Figma. Let's move on to the next, which is creating a horizontal scrolling effect in this design. To create a horizontal scrolling effect on this card, if you can remember when I said to create a vertical scrolling effect, we have to chip in more elements into the design. Same thing is going to apply to this place. Since we have two cards here, it's not going to create that horizontal scrolling effect that we want. So we have to put in more cards into this design. So I had to create like 3 more extra cards for our popular music to create that scrolling effect that we are looking for. So let's just chip this into our design to see if that is going to work. So this is our prototype here, but as I'm trying to like hover through these cards, it's not giving us that horizontal scrolling that we want. Let me show you how we can get that done, because it's not just only by adding more elements to your design. So let's just bring all these cards out once more. To create a horizontal scrolling effect on these cards, we have to select everything, of which I've already done. Then you right click on your keyboard. We'll be going with this frame selection that we have here. The shortcut for it is Ctrl+Alt+G on your keyboard. So we'll be going with frame selection, and what we are going to be doing is we'll be reducing the size of this frame just like this. This stuff that is going on here, we are going to be reducing it to something like this. The next thing we are going to be doing is to clip the content. Go to your properties menu and you will see this place where it says clip content, and click this box right here. You will then notice that all the cards that we're having here kind of disappeared, but it didn't really disappear because it's inside this frame, and that is why it is called a frame selection. So we are going to slide this one into our design, but we are not finished here with this process. You head back to your prototype menu that we have here. We are going to be changing this no scrolling here to horizontal scrolling. So let's try to play our prototype if this actually worked. So if I should hover through these cards, you will see that our cards now are responsive. So you now know how to select and how to create a horizontal scrolling in Figma. It's time for us to now move on into the next prototyping feature, which is how to do a cross-page animation. We'll be clicking this music we are listening to down here that will lead us into the second frame. It's very easy. Let me just show you how you can get that done. I will then select this element we want to prototype, and when you do that, you will notice this plus sign on all sides of this element. So this is what we're going to be doing. We'll be dragging out any of them, and when you do that, you will notice like an arrow sign that's popping out of the design. So with this, we're going to be connecting it to the frame we want to prototype it with, which is this one. So we just have to connect it and it's going to stick to the frame. So for the setting of this prototype, you are going to see trigger. On this place, you will see on tap, on drag, while hovering, while pressing, and so on. So in this case, we want it that when we tap on it, it's going to lead us into the second frame. So that is why it's set to on tap. Then the navigation is set to the second frame. For this animation, we are going to change it to like smart animate. So let's check if this actually worked. So from our prototype here, we are going to click this location by Bonner Boy here to see if it's going to lead us to the second frame, of which it did. So this is right here, it just worked as we have prototyped it. So what if we want to return back to the home page? How do we get that done? To create a prototype that is going to lead people back to the home page, we have to bring in like a navigation icon, which I just did right here. So if you notice, you will still see like this plus sign around this icon. We are going to be dragging any of them. So I'm just going to drag this out to connect it to the second frame, of which you can see from this place it connected back to the home page. I'll be clicking this right here to see if it's going to lead me back into the home page. So this is right here, it actually worked. So on this tutorial, we're able to achieve 3 basic type of animation, which is how to create a scrolling effect, horizontal scrolling effect right here. Then lastly, we're able to look on how to connect a frame to a second frame by clicking this down here. Then how to return this frame to the home page by this navigation that we have here. So this is the last module for this crash course, and I know you have learned a lot because we're able to achieve so many things to get you started with Figma. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe, and see you guys in the next tutorial.